This is the second half of your day dedicated to the future of ACDD, charting the course ahead. My name is Matthew Biddle. I'm at NOAA's Integrated Ocean Observing System Office. I am the Data Management and Cyber Infrastructure Community Manager. So what that means is I get people together to talk about topics like ACDD and what we should do with them and how we should move it into the future. So I'm here helping MC this session on behalf of the Marine Data Cluster. That's one of the places where we talk about marine data and different data management activities and things like that. And this is one of the topics that has come up quite a bit throughout the evolution of that cluster. So everyone can see my screen. Something just changed on the other side. I want to make sure we're all good because I got like 5 different screens going here. So I want to say welcome to the session. First and foremost, we have a notes document. You should be able to find it in the Kiko chat. I did drop it in the chat at the bottom, but I'll do that one more time just to make sure everyone has access to it. We will be using this to collect notes and discussion topics later on in our session. Please record your name, affiliation, all of that stuff in the notes so we can get an idea of who attended and what kind of conversation we were fostering here. By participating in the session, you agree to the ECIP community participation guidelines, which are linked all over the place. You can take a look at those. And the session is being recorded and will be archived for future viewing. So please stay muted if you're not speaking. And we will get to a point where we have a question and answer and open discussion session. So just please be mindful, use the raise hand feature if you want to, but we will be using some form of Q&A in terms of Slido. So what's the session going to be about today? We are, I'm going to give a little brief introduction, just setting up the topic for discussion. And then we have Kristen, Anna, Heather, and John talking about archiving IU's data at NCEI, which is heavily leveraging the ACDD recommendations. Ethan has graciously offered to come in and talk a little bit of the history of ACDD, and he'll also be speaking on behalf of John Grabiel on the process for updating ACDD in the past and just giving us an idea for what that might look like moving into the future. And then we're going to open it up for some question and answers based on those presentations. And then we're going to do breakout groups where we have a couple questions where we've identified that we'd like your all's input on what to do with ACDD into the future. And then we'll come back, have some more discussion, and then we'll conclude out the session and talk about next steps. So we will be using Slido for question and answer and polls throughout the session. There is links on there. There's a QR code. We will drop the link into the chat at hopefully in just a minute. But I did make a tiny URL, ecip-acdd. Hopefully you can get into there. That's where you can ask questions. They'll persist after the session. Okay, so ACDD, what is ACDD if you aren't aware of it? ACDD is the Attribute Conventions for Dataset Discovery. Basically, these are attributes recommended for describing a NetCDF dataset to discovery systems. What it does is identifies specific attributes, consistent naming for those attributes, and then a description on what to populate that attribute with. So it gives us some consistency across various datasets, across different observing types and methods with respect to discoverability of those data sets. This has been managed by ECIP, or was developed as part of the documentation cluster. There's a link at the bottom of this slide to the current existing ACDD 1.3. So why did we want to have this session? The last release of ACDD was in January 2015. Things have changed since then just a little bit. So what I did is I took our abstract and I jammed it into Google Gemini just to give me an idea of some visual representation of what we're going to talk about today. Basically, what has evolved over the years, where we have more emphasis on persistent identifiers. What are things that need to be updated in ACDD? How are conversations being fostered now around different standards and conventions? So the CF convention, as you moved into a GitHub structure, scienceonschema.org has also been using GitHub to have their conversations. So is that something ACDD should go into? And so today what we want to talk about is just some experiences and requirements. Get your all's feedback. What we're looking for is the community. This is a community community effort. We want to get your feedback on what's needed in ACDD and where does it need to go. If it needs to go somewhere, maybe we move to something else. I don't know. And then if there is support, let's figure out what the next steps are and how to move that into the future. So enough of my talking. I am going to hand it off to Anna Krelling, Kristen Sabi, John Ralph, and Heather McClellan. Anna Krelling is a technical data manager at NCEI. She has a background in physical oceanography and joined NCEI in March 2025 after working for a few years in academia and industry. Anna holds a PhD in marine science and technology from the University of Massachusetts and in oceanography from the University of Sao Paulo. Kristen Sabi is a scientific data manager at NCEI and has a background in quantitative ecology. And prior to joining NCEI in April 2025, she facilitated data management activities at Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and she holds a PhD in biology from the University of Florida. So I'll let Anna and Kristen take it away from here. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, Matt, do you mind sharing our slides? Thank you so much. Awesome. Well, yeah, I guess good morning, in case anyone's on an AM time zone, and afternoon, everyone. Thanks for...
Oh, you muted yourself, Kristen.
Thanks. Thanks, everyone, for attending our session and our talk. My name is Kristen Sabi, and along with Anna Krelling, my co-presenter for this talk, I'd like to introduce a metadata issue that our team has experienced in our work and may be common enough to warrant updates to the ACDD convention. So you can go to the next slide. So within NCEI, we're a team of primarily 4 people that meet pretty regularly to work on archiving integrated ocean observing system data, or IOS data. Of course, our work wouldn't be possible without all the data providers, as well as our other colleagues at NCEI and NOAA. You can go on to the next slide. And just to give a short background to IOS, IOS is a community of non-federal partners organized into 11 regional associations, and they collect many types of ocean observing data. A lot of the data that we have already archived at NCEI so far is oceanographic and meteorological data from buoys. And you can go then, yeah. And it also includes 3 national data assembly centers, which organize and make available data from high-frequency radar stations, underwater gliders, and marine animals tagged with satellite receivers. So NOAA mandates that IOS data is archived at NCEI, so it can be, oh, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. So NOAA mandates that this data is archived at NCEI, so it's useful for future generations. Because of this long archival period, it's especially important to make sure that the metadata is of sufficient quality so that, in possibly decades into the future, that this data is still understandable and usable. And of course, we rely on the FAIR principles, such that data is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And thus, we spend a lot of time focusing on metadata quality with these files. And here in this talk, just keep in mind that much of the data that we are currently archiving comes in the form of NetCDF files. So if you're not familiar with NetCDF, just imagine it's a file type that within a single file you have your data. So for example, maybe sea surface temperature over time, but you also have your metadata embedded within that same file. So you don't have to remember to associate multiple files with each other. It's all in the same file. And so that's what we're focusing on, and is motivating our thoughts about these metadata attributes. And let me now hand over the presentation to Anna Krelling, who's going to explore one of these metadata issues that we've encountered.
Thank you, Kristen. So yeah, I'm the technical data manager that works with these IU's data sets for archival at NCI. And I'm going to give you one or two examples of some issues that we have encountered that we think may or may not warrant some updates to ACDD. Okay, so one of the issues is I guess, different spellings of the same, either the same institution and or same creator or collaborator. So when we have different data files that all belong to the same data set, sometimes we get different spellings that refer to the same institution. So the example that I have on the screen is about Dauphin Island Sea Laboratory. So to the left, you see that there are 3 different spellings and they all refer to the same institution, right? So what we do to mitigate that problem at NCEI, we curate tables with standardized spellings. So all these 3 different spellings end up being mapped to just one standardized spelling, which is Dauphin Island Sea Lab. And as a result, what happens is, yes, thanks. On the landing page, which is what we call this page that has the data access information and also the metadata information. On this landing page, you're going to see just one institution, just the institution that all these different spellings refer to, and not multiple spellings of the same institution, right? We do not actually change any information in the data files. We just change how they are represented in the landing page, and that makes it much more findable. Okay, so we do that. Thanks. So we do that, but that's not really the ideal thing. What is the ideal thing? Now, next, please. Would be to have RORs for all the institutions that we have. So why would that be beneficial? I'm sure most of you know, just so we can know for sure which institution we're talking about. But besides that, there is a memorandum from 2002 that actually says that metadata should include persistent identifiers whenever possible. And that is for institutions as well as people, right? So here the example is for ROR, but that would be something similar to ORCIDs as well. Next, please. So, okay, we should have persistent identifiers for institutions and people, but how would we store these? Again, as Kristen said, we're talking about NetCDF files here, and generally speaking, global attributes. So ACDD 1.3 does not have any recommendation for this. And the IU's metadata requirements for NetCDF files inherits attributes from ACDD 1.3 and CF 1.13. So we could just make changes to the IU's metadata profile to add some way to store these PIDs. But we would really prefer to inherit attributes from broader conventions. And we believe that this might be an issue that's broad enough to warrant update to ACDD. Next, please. So we do have a proposed solution. Okay, so our proposed solution would be an update to ACDD, adding the following global attributes. So for individuals, we would have IDs for creator and publisher. And for institutions, we would have IDs for the creator institution and the publisher institution. These IDs could be any sort of ID, but ideally, it would be those would be ORCIDs and RORs. In the bottom of the slide, there's the link for the discussion. It's actually a pretty cool discussion. Whoever is interested, I would encourage to go check it out, maybe contribute if you'd like, besides contributing in this session, of course. Next, please. So what do you think? We do think that this is a relevant issue, and we do think that this is general enough that other people might relate and might encounter in their work. But of course, we can't be sure. So is this a problem that you do encounter in your work? That's the Slido poll. If you could go over there to answer this, we would appreciate. So we have an idea of what we're dealing with, how general this is. And while you're doing that, we put here a couple of topics to consider during the breakout discussions, right? So we're not really going to discuss that now, but we figured it would be good to just to have something to think about for now. So how do you currently capture persistent identifiers and metadata? Do you have a good idea of how to do that? And how does our proposed solution look for you? Does it look good? What would you do differently? And I guess that's it for our talk. It seems like quite a few people do encounter that in their own work. I guess that's it. Kristen, Matthew, thank you all for attending this talk.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Kristen. So next, we're going to dive into a presentation on ACDD, kind of a history of where it's evolved and how it's gotten how it's gotten to where it's at. So I think, let me make sure I have Ethan. Your slides are up. Okay, there we go. So we have Ethan Davis here to talk about a history of ACDD. Ethan Davis is a software engineer and technical manager at NSF Unidata at UCAR. He was one of the original developers of the Threads data server and of ACDD. His current focus is mainly on data standardization efforts, including work on NetCDF, the CF conventions for NetCDF, GeoZar, and other OGC and WMO standards. So thank you so much, Ethan. Really appreciate you coming in, and feel free to take the reins.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for operating the slides. Yeah, just a quick, brief, hopefully early history of ACDD, and kind of including some of the how it started and why and what kind of led up to it. So next slide, please. So late 90s, there was still a lot of ordering, requesting data by email, getting it delivered on a tape, or some downloading, CDs, tapes, eventually moving to DVDs. I don't remember when those came out. So OpenDAP was kind of an early remote data access protocol with subsetting capabilities. So pulling the data directly into your application using whatever kind of API, not a web API, a programming API, and bringing it right into analysis tools. And so that was kind of the early days of that. Usually it's you get a file, then you bring it into your thing. So it brought a lot of things into focus, I think. NetCDF and HDF kind of came together at that point. And there's different metadata for those two different things. So CF, HDF, EOS. At the time, it wasn't CF. It was one of the precursors there. But the issue was, or one of the issues was, that you had to know the URL for a data set, for each individual data set. And that kind of spun off a number of cataloging type issues, or inventory listing of files and data sets and how to access them, the OpenDAP URL. And so Threads was one of those. It came along, and it added was trying to also be a publication capable, have extra metadata, allowing people to publish their metadata and really describe it for people. But it came, so there was, and I was at Unidata. Threads came out of Unidata. NetCDF comes out of Unidata, and so that's where we focused. But it was the Threads part was a digital library effort, and it kind of brought together those two different worlds, kind of the NetCDF, CF, HDF, EOS type metadata, which is more how to use it, the structure of the data, that kind of thing, the things you need to actually visualize it and analyze it, and the descriptive metadata that discovery service would want. So that was the early days of Dublin Core and ISO 19115. FGDC and DIF have been around, but most of that focused on kind of the request download files, not having a data access service endpoint that you could actually point to and pull the data in. So there were some differences there, differences between kind of a general discovery metadata and a more geospatial or Earth system science one. So Threads kind of started bridging that. There were other efforts, similar efforts around as well. And then, so that all kind of led up to recognizing that there were this use metadata, discovery metadata, and that there were gaps, lots of gaps. Next slide, please. So started developing a lot of tools. A lot of people were doing this, not just in Threads and OpenDAP, but all over, developing different tools for how to harvest metadata from existing data, or existing discovery services, and how to kind of automate that, whatever was possible. And then how to, it turned out there was a lot of need especially in the NetCDF, and that's where I was focused on Threads in the NetCDF world of gathering this metadata and trying to automate it. And there was a lot of metadata in the different metadata data files and NetCDF files in HDF. But a lot of it was missing that you would want for discovery. So that's kind of when, next slide, please, I started looking at how to describe, what types of NetCDF conventions or NetCDF attributes could be added to have it capture more of that high-level discovery metadata. And so I kind of started working at this with a number of people, targeting Threads, pulling metadata out of files and then feeding them into digital libraries. That was kind of the workflow that we had at the time, and building an extension of CF is how I imagine it. So next slide. And so once I got to a certain level, I probably bounced it around with a lot of people at this point, and had brought it up in kind of the CF arena as a possible thing to add on. But CF has this strong design principle to minimize redundancy, and there's a lot of ACDD can be extracted from the metadata that exists already in a CF data set. So it was seen as a little bit redundant, and it was just kind of decided to keep it as a separate convention. So next slide. We had the page up on that. I'd been drafting it on a Unidata website page, and had it up there for some years until I think Ted Haberman sent me an email and said, "Hey, can we start advancing this?" So next slide, please. And that's when, Ted and I forget who else was involved in the kind of the NOAA side, publishing the 1.1 release in, I think my records, what I was looking at was 2013, and then ACDD 1.3 by ECIP in 2015. And that's the end of my slides. I guess I have one more, but that just says thank you. And so that kind of leads right into the next set of slides, which is John Graybeal's presentation that I'm presenting for. I'll let Matt. You have an intro for John, so I'll.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ethan. That was some fantastic background. I've learned a whole bunch. I'm going to go back and rewatch this video because there's a lot of really good information. So thank you for that presentation. Ethan's going to present on behalf of John Graybeal the process for updating ACDD in the past. Unfortunately, John had jury duty, wasn't able to make it to this session, but Ethan kindly volunteered to give his slides. John first supported oceanographic data management at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute in 2001 and began working for metadata standards shortly after. While leading the Marine Metadata Interoperability Project and participating in the original OOI cyber infrastructure development, he began co-chairing with Anna Milan the ACDD version 1.3 steering committee hosted by the ECIP documentation cluster. As part of the surviving body of work from that era, he used lessons learned from ACDD 1.3 development in many subsequent adventures in research, science, interoperability, most recently as a GoFair US team member at San Diego Supercomputer Center and as a volunteer coordinator for of the Onto Choice project. So I'll let Ethan take it away. That's not Ethan's background. That's John's background. I think we got that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And so I was kind of a distant observer at this point anyway, next slide, please. I think I'm not going to go into the ACDD thing that he has on that first slide. I'll leave that to you all to investigate. Right. So a review of the 1.3 development, right, happened in ECIP. There's a lot of information on the ECIP pages about this. So yeah, there were 17 people involved, and it took almost 2 years. Right, we've covered some of that already in Matt's in the introduction for John. So next slide, please. Yep, more on the different people involved. Yeah, a lot of people interacting and yeah, kicking it off. And I did. Okay, I mean, I just was like, yeah, please take it and do what you can, but I'm probably not going to be super involved right now. So, all right, and then next slide. Right, so there was this long discussion ongoing for a while that kind of led to all this, and then I think in the next slide, please, it basically suggested forming a steering committee, and that's kind of what we were just talking about, were that list of people, and so that started and formed, and I'm not sure. Yes, move the discussion list to ECIP. So that was this was kind of at the same time that we were deciding how to actually and what structure to put this in. So where to house this discussion and the whole process of deciding. So it went into ECIP as a cluster. I think the anyway, describing data. Well, I can't remember what the name of the cluster was, but it was a cluster there about data. Shocking. Yeah. Okay. Next slide. And yeah, here's the saga, as Sean puts it, of this release from requesting the change from 1.1 was already released at the time of the beginning of this line. Okay, and yeah, so they started that. There was a 1.2 for a long while there, and I think there were two different versions. It was slowly advancing, but then it kind of, I can't remember the particular reasons, and maybe John goes into this next slide actually. But then, right, 1.3 began and got approved, and all the documentation got finished in 2015. So next slide, please. All right, I will admit I've looked through all these slides, but I haven't memorized them. So I'm going to say what was achieved: a lot of useful and things, and made things computable. So yeah, now there's URLs for various things that help make it a little bit more machine readable. Added some structure. There are lots of things that got advanced. And added to the, you're right, I guess on the left side there, the usefulness, there's some newer attributes that weren't in the previous versions, and then there's some more of the details of the URLs and things that were defined, or the convention string, how to actually define the convention in a data set. So, all right, next slide. And okay. It was a long process, evidently, and I, from my distant view, I didn't suffer as much, I guess, but I did see it, a lot of discussion, and I remember that. So, okay, we'll skip from this. You can read that at your leisure at some point. Right. So, process lessons. Yeah. Plan ahead, decide some things up ahead. I think some of these decision points were long discussions during the process, and that's, it took 2 years, and that was probably a lot of it was, well, I guess it would have had to happen either ahead of time or before or during. So if it had happened beforehand, then it would have just been another step in the process. But I think there's a lot of big questions that need answering in this type of activity. So good agreed persistent tools for documentation. I think that's one thing that moving a lot of like CF and science on schema, science, whatever that is, the schema on science for a schema. No, all right. They've all moved to GitHub. There's a lot of good process there around advancing documentation and standards documentation as well. I'm not sure how whatever the name of it is, the science schema thing, how the process works. CF, I know pretty well and has a pretty strong process and guidance for how to approve changes. I think that's a really important thing that's needed if you're ever going to be working on a standard. And so either find a place that already has that and join in there or build on top of it because it is a long process. It seems overwhelming at times and seems unnecessary, but usually you'll find a reason that it's necessary because it's just hard to get however many people to agree on a standard. And the important thing is in an earlier session today, the chunk manifest, James Gallagher mentioned that you have limiting choices is important for standards, and that is hard to do. So that's one reason having some design goals that you have and a strong process for making decisions is really important. All right. See, I'm rambling on here around these slides. So let's go to the next one. All right. And sorry, I'll just go back one. Sorry, please. And I'll say there is a lot of work on the logistics side. So if you're going to chair this kind of activity, or try to be support it. Well, you want more than one person supporting this kind of activity because it is a lot of work. So, and be prepared to say stop. Right. There's always room for improvement, but find places to stop so you can, and then, there's always another version number. All right. Now I'll stop and we can go to the Q&A slide.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ethan. Thank you for stepping up on behalf of John. I think you did a fantastic job. Thank you to all the presenters, to Kristen and Anna as well. And now I'd just like to open it up for a little bit of Q&A, reflections on what you all have heard. Anything standing out to you or anything you need to air some grievances before we dive into our next part of the session? And I'm trying to pull up the Kiko chat, and for some reason I lost the link, or the Slido. Sorry, I keep getting names mixed up. Here's the Slido, if you're interested. Or I think you all have the capability to unmute and ask questions if you have any questions. Yeah, John.
So, if we go back to the question that Anna asked, or the proposed solution, there are challenges with a lot of these things. Ethan talked about defining an attribute for a platform name and instruments and all of and then there's things like the keyword attributes, but most of those also include a related attribute to say which vocabulary you're talking about. So for example, applying that same thinking to the individuals here, a creator ID. Well, which ID are you talking about? Is that researcher ID? Is that orc ID? So then you might want to have a creator ID vocabulary attribute, which says that in fact, this is an ORCID ID for this creator. Similarly for, institutions, you might want to do the same thing because there's grids, there's roars, there's, whatever. And suddenly you find yourself in attribute, in a pile of attributes, a rich steaming pile of attributes. So it gets very, very complex. And I will say that in my experience, people don't do that very well. keywords say they're GCMD, but then they're not. They're just a list of terms separated by commas, and all bets are off and good luck. So I'll leave it there because, there's good points about being more specific, but there's also the sort of drawbacks that the more specific you are, the harder it is for people to follow the directions.
I see folks in the chat. Feel free to unmute if you have comments back to John. But I can just say that Jiping has the same question, and Ken KC recommends ACD, or says that maybe ACDD should demand the use of a specific vocabulary. I know with the marine data cluster, when we went down the vocabulary, we turned into just a list of here's available vocabularies that you can use, because there's not one to rule them all type of a thing. Okay. Feel free to unmute.
Thought I saw Ed's hand up.
Yeah. Ed, did you still have a question?
Oh, well, since I'm called on,
Yeah.
I just had like one observation. I mean, besides, these are all good ideas, improving ACDD for archive management and down the road discovery. But I'm just wondering if the community is also keeping track of any other success stories of using the ACDD metadata in tools and services. Off the top of my head, I don't really know any, but perhaps it would be a good idea for the community to start tracking that. And I'm thinking of things like visualization tools, or maybe subsetting tools that are leveraging the time and space information inside an etcdf granule that has valid ACDD metadata. And there's probably other applications I'm thinking of, or that are out there that I'm not thinking of. But yeah, that was my recommendations. That I think besides these, I guess forming a working group to further improve ACDD would be good to start collecting success stories out there that of how people are leveraging the ACD metadata. That was my recommendation. More an observation, not a question.
Yeah, John, do you have a response?
Oh, thanks, Ed. Yeah, it's interesting, the examples or the possible examples you were thinking of, because I was thinking more about successes in the documentation we have achieved. I mean, yes, all the examples I gave were sort of, what's the word? Perhaps not as positive as they could have been, but at the same time, the ACDD got adopted by IUSE. It's part of their metadata profile. All of the data coming through IUSE has to, at some level, adhere to at least part of ACDD. Actually, I was thinking about who was it in the chat said, oh yes, it was Ethan who said, validation tools. It's like, yeah, IUSE built a metadata profile. What do you call that? Profile checker.
Yeah.
And that's great, but there are so many things that one gets in a report when one runs the validator, that it's hard to know which ones are really important, which ones are interesting, and you could probably do things better, but they're not that important in the grand scheme of things. And so it provides some useful feedback, but it also provides a lot of confusion or opportunity for confusion. And so thanks, Chris.
Yeah, we've noticed that too, because we use ACD heavily in NASA satellite products, and we've extended that checker you've talked about and kind of adapted it. And, we have an online checker for doing validations of both ACD and CF and NetCDF and HDF granules. But yeah, sometimes reading and interpreting the report yeah, like you said, you need to be kind of savvy what you need to pay attention to, and there's sometimes kind of like ephemeral, not too important stuff that can be safely ignored in some cases. So yeah, that's the checker. That's iOS compliance checker. And, we many years ago we adapted, I took the software and kind of adapted it and extended it to suit our purposes and stuff.
So yeah, so that brings up an interesting point, Ed, is that maybe on a sort of project by project basis, the most important attributes to make sure that are compliant should be prioritized as part of that project. And that way, the actual implementers of the standard can make sure that the things that are most important are done well. That's one thing I was thinking about. But I was also going to go back to your original statement, Ed, and say, yeah, I mean, as I started to say, we're getting a lot of data through iUse that is documented at some level, compliant with ACDD and the iUse metadata profile. And that has enabled us to do some really good stuff with, documenting all the contributors to certain data sets that provide that information, and to document the attributes of variables of other data sets that provide that information. It's just not consistent across the board.
Right. Oh, this is all good. Thanks.
Yeah, Ethan, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I guess, that this kind of points out that, we work on all these technical solutions to these kinds of problems, and really or a large portion of it, and the hardest portion of it, is social and cultural, and that kind of process for actual people to do things. So I always like the technical solution part of it, but I certainly recognize these days that the cultural and social part is the really, really hard one to nail down. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And yeah. If anyone has a good solution for that part.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'm supposed to say is AI will help us figure that one out. But of course, that's there are a lot of caveats to that.
I see, Micah, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I don't have a solution for that problem, but I was going to maybe just comment, follow up on what Ethan said a little bit, because, I think iUse is maybe one example of a group that adopted ACDD fairly heavily. And that may have been because, my former boss, Derek Snowden, was involved in creating it. I don't know. But I imagine there are quite a few other groups and other, data related organizations that have adopted ACDD and kind of have a stake in changes that are made to it. So, something else that we should think about anyway is how to do, how to reach out to those groups, how to get them engaged, and how we might figure out who they are. So just, it's kind of like messaging and the social aspect, another side of it potentially, if and when changes are made to the current ACDD standard.
Yeah, that's a great point. Are there other groups that are heavily using it? At least on this call?
I think some of sorry, Matt, I didn't put my hand up. I think some of ACDD is used by a lot of groups, including GRIST, at some level, but I think iUse is probably the best example. I'd have to take a look at some data sets and give you a better answer, Matt.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I'll jump here again. The ACD is used heavily in the kind of recommended granular metadata for NASA products, including GRIST. So that's where we've done a lot of use of ACD metadata in both GRIST and NASA, and CF, of course.
Okay. So I think part of it is building out that what's the user community here, building that list of maybe. I thought ESIP was the group, but maybe there's a broader group that's outside of ESIP as well that needs to be part of the conversation. So I got 3 hands up. I don't know who went up first. I don't know if there's an organization. I see Micah, Sarah, and Ethan. Micah, was that an old one? That was an old one. All right, Sarah, go for it.
I'll go back to Ken's comment in the chat about whether or not we need to pick fixed vocabularies for some of the PIDs. If your primary user community is NOAA, NASA, and other federal agencies, we have a requirement to comply with NSPM 33 for PIDs. So that could limit the available choices that maybe you do want to go with roars or orchids and not leave that flexibility that then you would have to further subdefine in your IUS profile.
That's a great point. Could you put that numbered acronym in the chat so I have it? Yeah, that one. Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Ethan, I think that might be the last. This might be the last question, and then we'll go into breakout rooms.
All right, I'll keep it quick. I was just going to mention that kind of on the CF side of things, the biggest group that standardizes things there is CMIP and the other MIPS, related MIPS there. So lots and lots of data, but that's a huge process with lots of infrastructure in terms of different committees and different this and that. And so having, so I think, well, 2 things. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to really hold people accountable to these standards. Also, I think it's important to remember that and so I'm using CF as kind of the example here. There are a lot of different projects that use CF and have, what are they called? Flavors of CF or certain restrictions or requirements for particular fields in CF for their project. And so I think it would be good to be cautious about adding too many things specific to a particular group to ACDD and think of it as a framework that groups can use and write a profile to. So a lot of the there's a lot of existing CF profiles and there's a lot of existing CF and ACDD profiles that people define. So that was just 2 points that came to mind. Sorry.
No, that's a great point. Thank you so much for raising that, Ethan. And I think that's kind of where the IUS one came out, is we have a specific community. And so these are the things that we're picking and choosing from not necessarily picking and choosing, but this is how we recommend you implement whatever the recommended standards or conventions are. So that makes a lot of sense. So now we're a little bit behind, but I think we got enough wiggle room to make it all work. We're going to do, as an ESIP session, we're going to do a breakout because that's what we do in ESIP. We like to get in small groups and we like to talk about stuff. So I have a couple questions for the breakout group. So we're going to split up. I think we're going to do about 5 people in each breakout. There's 30. So what is that? That's, oh, and now people are dropping off. So there you go. Well, let's do like 5 people per breakout room. We just want you all to get together and have a similar conversation about, do some introductions, meet each other, get to know other ESIP contributors. And then we have a set of 5 questions of what are you hoping to get out of this session? What would be the benefits of updating ACDD? What concerns do you have about updating it? What's missing and should it be updated? And would you be interested in participating in the update process? So we're gonna do about 15 minutes of breakout rooms. I will drop actually the notes for the breakout rooms. If you can please add your notes into the agenda document which I am dropping in the chat right now. There's a section for breakouts, and there's a section for breakout 1, 2, 3, 4. Once we have the total number, I'll have a section for each of you. If you could just drop in some notes, and then we'll have a recap afterwards and summarize what we talked about and hopefully identify some next steps. I hope you all had a great discussion. I hope you met somebody new that you haven't seen before at ESIP. That's the hope with those breakout rooms, is just to get to know everybody. What I wanted to do first, actually, is walk through and do a little bit of report outs for each of the groups. I think there were 5 groups. I think the second breakout room was empty, so we only have breakout room 1, 3, and 4, I think is what we have. So you don't need to do 5. The introductions. And 5. There was a 5. Okay, great. Thank you. But if each group, if you could just walk through like what the discussion was about, what if you hit on some of these discussion questions, or if you talked about the surf last weekend, that's fine too. But just a brief report out from each of the groups on how the discussion went. So I will hand it off to. Does anybody from group 1 want to jump in and summarize just a little bit of what you all talked about?
All right, sure, yeah, I'll do that.
There we go.
I was the lead of group 1. I'm just looking at the notes here that Carolina graciously collected here. So, yeah, I think the consensus was that certainly ACD is very, very, very valuable to a lot of people's work, but they are definitely on board with seeing changes. And there's some things perhaps where ACD is not working as best as it could. So I think overall people are positively inclined to see ACD progress forward and contribute in that capacity. It was a little disconcerting to see a little bit the status of the current documentation and well, not the documentation, but we saw that ACDD has a GitHub site that was established several years ago, but there's been no activity, and it's really kind of just in its infancy. So one of the recommendations that should be used as a springboard for whatever work goes forward to be able to document things like GitHub issues and things of that nature. Everybody's doing that way. Okay, so what did we really kind of talk about and come to? And maybe come to or the ideas that were kind of floated in our session. One of the things is we do see the value in standardizing on vocabularies, things that have been proposed for things like using the org ID and the ORR for the creator and stuff. Definitely we see some value in that because if you don't standardize on those vocabularies, sometimes there's a danger of getting the metadata inconsistencies. And another recommendation that I personally came up with is at the variable level, perhaps it would be good to document things like the compression and the chunk sizes right there, versus having to go to, a user discover those in software like Python or use Panoply to figure out what those chunk sizes are. Sometimes having that information right up front is really useful. So that's one thing I personally would like to see. And yeah, we did, maybe better guidance on how to implement ACD would be a valuable thing to undertake for this group as it goes forward. And I think maybe that's about it. Is anybody else, did I miss anything from our group that somebody wants to talk about quickly? Otherwise, I think we are done. Matthew?
Yeah.
Oh, Carolina, go ahead.
I thought it was interesting, the idea of some sort of guideline for building extensions.
Oh yes, the extensions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that kind of like Ethan had talked about the idea of limiting things that actually go into the ACDD standard, and then having guidelines for groups to add to it. Okay.
Yeah, having the ability to do customized extensions. We also thought that would be important to talk about, at least, and figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ed. I see there's a question from Andrew. Go for it.
I was just kind of wondering, with the chunk sizes thing, was that kind of in the context of non-NetCDF type data formats that this is being stored in?
No, it could not. It could be NetCDF. Could be TIFF.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just an idea I threw out there. I don't know how valuable it is, but I think it might be.
Barnett, did you want to comment at all about the documentation around like global attributes versus variable level attributes, or is that for?
I mean, I brought it up in mine, but we're group 5, so
So
presumably at the end.
Okay, good. Okay, good. So it will be great.
All right. Group 3. Or actually, were there any other questions or comments for the first? There's a lot of good points brought up there, but hopefully we'll have a little bit of time. So group 3, does anybody want to report out from that group?
Well, if Ping's not going to, then I guess I will, which...
I was waiting for you.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. We started out with the idea that understanding what the benefit is of having a given ACDD attribute. Why is it important? Having that documented is important. So then you know what people are trying to achieve and what benefit you'll get. So the question was, will, for example, including ORCID IDs in a netcdf file for a given contributor actually improve discoverability? Is that the goal, or is that going to happen? Or is this something that a system will use down the line that will enable data sets and publications to be connected? And so what's the benefit? So that was sort of the top level entry into our discussion. And then I think everybody agreed that just having an ID wouldn't be good enough, even if federal folks are required to use ORCID IDs. That doesn't mean everybody's going to. There are still other IDs that can apply, and so documenting what type of ID you're using as well as the ID itself. There was some discussion about consistency of use. Someone pointed out in the question and answer earlier, I can't remember who it was, that ORCID recommends using the whole URL, but many data files are documented with merely the digits with hyphens in between. So having some consistency recommendation is probably important. And then a lot of discussion about how do we achieve consistency, and what does an implementation profile mean? And IUse has one, and yet there are challenges in IUse for people to meet the requirements of that profile. So going back to the social engineering question, how do we entice, help, flog people until they do whatever the carrot or stick you need to get things done? How can that work? What do we have to do from the social side, the community side? I think that's much of what we talked about, although there was also a point made that in some cases having a lot of ACDD requirements is actually kind of a drawback, and in fact it's important for some systems to have very simple minimal metadata. So going back to the idea that any given project must make some very serious decisions up front before recommending specific attributes to be either required or not used at all. So some choices have to be made up front. I think that was everything. Peng?
Yeah, good. You did it good. And I probably just wanted to stress that we also indicate that it's good to have a guidance on how to implement it. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's some of the consistency I'm hearing is guidance on implementation, documentation, clear pieces.
Just before you move on, Matt, I would also say making it very clear what the benefits of complying are. Why do we do this work, and what's the payoff?
Yeah. Good point. All right, any questions for some of the stuff that the Breakout 3 came up with? All right, Breakout group number 4.
I was the note taker for breakout group number 4. We had a group with various levels of knowledge in this topic. And there were people that just wanted to learn more so they can see how it applies to different data sets. People who wanted to keep managed data sets to current standards and also learn about the group efforts that will come next. And we discussed that there would be quite a few benefits to updating ACDD because a lot has changed since the last version. It would be nice to have support for cloud or AI-ready data and to enhance the PIDs. I think one of the main topics of discussion were the concerns about updating the ACDD, which is drawing boundaries is important. Knowing where to stop is important. So it was mentioned that maybe it would be good to just change a little thing and then update, and then change another little thing and then update. So multiple small changes, versions, instead of just one very large change for an entirely new thing, very different from the previous one, just so we can make incremental progress instead of trying to make something very large and just never getting anything done because it's too much of a commitment. Yeah, I think that's basically it.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. Any questions on breakout number 4? Andrew, thank you for that link. I was trying to think of that like 3 months ago of versioning with the calendar, and yeah. Cool. All right. Breakout group. Yeah, go for it, Anna.
Before you move, just something that I forgot. To verify compliance, that was something that was also discussed, that it's not missing from the convention itself, but it would be important to have something that is somewhat standardized that would verify compliance, because if we come up with new versions and we can't verify compliance, then it's, kind of defeats the purpose to an extent.
Right. So hand in hand with compliance checkers. Gotcha. Okay. What about breakout group number 5?
So I took notes, but I'm happy to let someone else present unless there are no takers, and I'll just give it a go. It sounds like nobody's jumping in. Well, in our group, we definitely had interest in, keeping ACDD alive. It's a big success. There was one question, one important question about what body or group will work on the update or maintenance, because that's important to have, some group take ownership. I think, we left off thinking, why not ESIP maintaining ownership of ACDD? But, we might have, with more time, we might have arrived at a different conclusion or stayed at the same conclusion. I think, there were some concerns about making updates to ACDD that I think previous groups have talked about. So, we don't want to add too much that, it becomes, hard to manage and navigate. And also, ACDD being a big success has been adopted by many groups, but, we want to make sure we mitigate any negative impacts of any update. And then I think Andrew had maybe comments about, ACDD not being granular enough, and hopefully I captured that. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in and give some thoughts.
I'll just mention, I think we talked a little bit at the end about, or I did, maybe I mentioned it as we were leaving, that the process of making decisions and making and folding in changes and how that actually works. GitHub is one thing, but you need a process around that and some structure to help you actually make the decisions and know who can make the decisions, or what groups of people can, how many people you need to make the decision, whatever. And I think that's a big thing that I don't think ESIP has a standard way of doing that for a standards document, for instance, or maybe it's not standardized, but other documents have probably had some kind of process. It might actually be nice for ESIP, for all of us, ESIP, I mean, all of us, to have some kind of lightweight defined structure for making those decisions in a standards document kind of way. But I think that's something important for ACDD to think about as we move forward. Yeah. So
you mean like a off the shelf? You want to like instant working group? Like
right.
Like here,
well,
just go.
Yeah, here are the groups that you should define and what permissions they have and how long they should wait and get comments. And yeah, I mean, I base a lot of this on CF, which I'm involved in pretty heavily, and the process for, there's a 3-week period. If nobody complains about something, then it can go forward, and here are the different committees that can make decisions, with input from everybody. Anyway, yeah. So that kind of thing.
Interesting. That feels like it would be useful on multiple levels. Okay, any questions on that last breakout group? All right. So, our last poll. Is anyone interested in actually continuing this discussion, potentially during one of the marine data cluster sessions, potentially during a different cluster session, and keeping this moving into the future? It sounded like there was general consensus that, yeah, we need to maintain ACDD and it needs to move into the future. The next question is, where does that future, where does that move, where does that conversation go? Where do we continue? And who takes the reins? What group takes the reins? And I know this is when everybody's going to sign off because it's 5:27 on the East Coast and everyone's pretty toast for the day. But hop into the Slido, let us know what you think, and what we can do is set up an announcement through ESIP on what the next plans are for ACDD. So I'm going to drop the Slido link in here if I could find it real quick. And any other remaining questions or comments, thoughts, ideas? And then I'll close out the session, but I want to leave it open. I know a lot of people there's a lot of good discussion going on. So if you have an opinion or something you'd like to raise, please bring it up now. Okay. I gave it 6 seconds. That's my limit. Yeah, Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess there is that GitHub link to the very quiet, was it ACDD repo? But just a thought, like we could use that to start our discussion about where to go next, since we don't have any concrete plans, but we have interest. Unless there are any better ideas that we can come up with in like 30 seconds, that could be where we could, start a discussion and chime in and include individuals that aren't attending the conference, but I think are also really interested. So unless anyone has any better suggestions, I think we could start an issue in that repo and get some discussion going on where to go next.
That sounds like a good action item. Cool. So everybody follow that repository and hop into any issues that you see pop up. Kristen, do you want to start that first one of where to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I guess I have to figure out what question I'm asking, but yeah, I guess I think who wants to be involved, lead the charge, when should we meet and how, and yeah. And if anyone else posts an issue first asking questions, my feelings will not be hurt. That would be great. So, but yeah, I will I will make sure the something gets posted. So thanks.
All right. So we're at time. I just want to say thank you so much to Kristen, Anna, Ethan, and John during jury duty. Thank you everybody for coming in. Thank you, Patty, for helping out with the technical side of the house. This was a great session. I learned a lot. I feel like we got a lot of good discussion. So have a great rest of your ESIP and keep an eye on that GitHub repository. We'll start some conversations over there. Other than that, thank you all for the great conversation. I really appreciate the discussion here. It was fantastic.